World War I, often called the Great War, was a pivotal moment in human history, not only for its geopolitical consequences, but also for the way it revolutionized warfare itself. The conflict, which raged from 1914 to 1918, was unlike anything the world had ever seen. For centuries, wars were fought in relatively predictable patterns. Armies marched in formation, horses charged into battle, and rifles were the primary tool of the infantry. But all of that changed in World War I. This was the war where innovation met destruction and science became a critical weapon. Today, we'll dive into how technological advancements during World War I forever altered the battlefield, from poison gas to tanks and beyond. As war erupted in 1914, many believed it would be short-lived, a matter of months at most. But they couldn't have been more wrong. The war bogged down into a grueling stalemate, with both sides entrenched across a vast, muddy landscape. It was this environment, static, brutal, and deadly, that became a breeding ground for innovation. Traditional tactics quickly proved obsolete, and nations scrambled to develop new technologies to gain an advantage. Let's explore some of these groundbreaking developments. One of the most infamous innovations of World War I was poison gas. It's hard to overstate how shocking and terrifying this weapon was to soldiers in the trenches. The first large-scale use of poison gas occurred in 1915 at the Second Battle of Ypres, when German forces unleashed chlorine gas. As a greenish-yellow cloud rolled across no man's land, soldiers found themselves choking, gasping for air, their lungs burning from the chemical reaction. Many died agonizing deaths, and those who survived often suffered long-term health effects. The psychological impact of poison gas was just as profound as its physical destruction. The sight of a gas attack caused widespread panic, forcing militaries to adapt rapidly. Soon, gas masks became standard issue. These masks, with their eerie appearance, became a grim symbol of the war. But as defenses improved, so too did the gases. Mustard gas, introduced later in the war, wasn't just deadly when inhaled. It caused severe burns on the skin, rendering trenches and dugouts uninhabitable. Poison gas may not have been the war-winning weapon its developers hoped for, but it encapsulated the desperate and brutal nature of the conflict. While gas attacked soldiers in a horrifyingly intimate way, artillery redefined destruction on a massive scale. The war saw the widespread use of howitzers and heavy guns capable of firing shells miles away. The scale of artillery barrages during World War I was unprecedented, and their destructive power was devastating. Entire landscapes were obliterated. Forests were turned into splintered wastelands, and villages were reduced to rubble. The Battle of Verdun and the Battle of the Somme were especially notable for their relentless artillery bombardments. At Verdun, the German army fired over 1 million shells in just a few days. Artillery not only killed, it shattered the morale of troops. Soldiers described the relentless shelling as a kind of madness. They lived in constant fear of sudden death from a shell landing nearby, often suffering from what was then termed shell shock, a condition we now recognize as post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Artillery transformed the battlefield into a landscape of craters and corpses, further embedding the war's reputation as a vision of hell on earth. But let's not forget the skies, a frontier that had remained largely untouched by warfare until World War I. The conflict saw the first widespread use of airplanes in combat. At first, planes were used primarily for reconnaissance, allowing armies to gather intelligence on enemy positions and movements. But it didn't take long for airmen to start arming their planes with machine guns, bombs, and even rudimentary rockets. The era of the dogfight was born. Pilots became the knights of the sky, engaging in deadly duels above the trenches. Some became famous aces, like Manfred von Richthofen, the infamous Red Baron. While the impact of air power in World War I was relatively limited compared to later conflicts, the innovations in aviation laid the groundwork for the massive air campaigns of World War II and beyond. Down on the ground, however, one of the most game-changing inventions was the tank. The very concept of an armored vehicle capable of crossing trenches and shrugging off small arms fire was revolutionary. The British were the first to deploy tanks on the battlefield, debuting them at the Battle of the Somme in 1916. These early models, known as Mark-Burn tanks, were slow, cumbersome, and prone to mechanical failure, but they represented a glimpse of the future. Please take a moment to like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new daily videos. As the war progressed, tanks became more reliable and effective. They could crush barbed wire, withstand machine gun fire, and traverse difficult terrain. By the end of the war, coordinated tank assaults were proving devastatingly effective, foreshadowing the mechanized warfare that would dominate the 20th century. Another often overlooked innovation of the war was the development of portable machine guns. While heavy water-cooled machine guns, like the Maxim, had already been in use before the war, they were largely static weapons used to defend positions. The introduction of lighter, more mobile designs like the Lewis gun and the Bergmann MP-18 allowed for greater tactical flexibility. These weapons turned small units into formidable threats, capable of laying down a deadly hail of bullets. Machine guns, both static and portable, were responsible for much of the war's staggering death toll. Communication, too, saw remarkable advancements during World War I. The sheer scale of the conflict demanded better coordination between units. Field telephones, though limited by the need for wires, became a critical tool. More importantly, the war saw the first significant use of wireless radio in combat. Though rudimentary by modern standards, early radio sets allowed for faster and more reliable communication, especially during battles. The war also spurred innovations in cryptography and signals intelligence, as each side sought to intercept and decode enemy messages. These developments laid the foundation for the sophisticated communication systems we rely on today. Naval warfare also saw its fair share of technological leaps during World War I. Submarines or U-boats became a potent force, particularly for the German Navy. Armed with torpedoes, U-boats wreaked havoc on Allied shipping, sinking both military and civilian vessels. The sinking of the RMS Lusitania in 1915, for example, was a turning point in the war, influencing public opinion in neutral nations like the United States. To counter the submarine threat, the Allies developed convoy systems and new technologies like depth charges and sonar, marking the beginnings of modern anti-submarine warfare. Meanwhile, dreadnought battleships represented the pinnacle of naval power with their massive guns and steel armor. Though the great naval battles of the war were relatively few, the arms race to build these leviathans demonstrated the importance of naval supremacy. And let's not forget the human innovations in tactics and strategy. The war was as much about adapting to new technology as it was about creating it. The static nature of trench warfare, for instance, forced generals to rethink traditional offensive strategies. The creeping barrage, where artillery fire advanced incrementally ahead of infantry, was one such adaptation. Infiltration tactics, developed by the Germans in the latter stages of the war, emphasized small, mobile units exploiting weak points in enemy lines, an approach that would evolve into the blitzkrieg tactics of World War II. Even in the face of unprecedented destruction, necessity remained the mother of invention. Engineers and scientists worked tirelessly to solve problems on the battlefield, from designing better helmets to developing flamethrowers for clearing trenches. The war's relentless demand for innovation accelerated technological progress in ways that would resonate far beyond the battlefield. So why does this matter today? The technological innovations of World War I didn't just change the way wars were fought, they changed the very nature of warfare itself. They ushered in an era where science and industry became integral to military power. They showed that wars could be fought on land, at sea, in the air, and even within the minds of soldiers. The lessons learned, often at an unbearable cost, continue to shape the strategies and technologies of modern conflicts. Before we wrap up, take a moment to think about the sheer scale of the change brought about during this time. In just 4 years, humanity went from a world where cavalry charges were still considered viable to one where tanks, airplanes, and chemical weapons dominated the battlefield. The rapid pace of innovation during World War I is a testament to both human ingenuity and the devastating consequences of war. If you found this exploration of World War I's technological innovations as fascinating as I did, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more deep dives like this one to you. And as always, stay curious.